Well, I understand this will be a difficult session for all of you. This is a post-lunch period, and you may feel dizzy while looking at the lecture. So, let us see, even during this, with this dizziness, how much can we learn in this session. So, well, in the next probably again 90 minutes, I'll talk about the design of flexible pavement as per IRC 37 2018. So IRC 37 2018 is the guidelines for the design of flexible pavements we use in India. So I hope the participants are aware about these guidelines. Uh, as mostly I usually do, I dedicate my presentation, this presentation specifically, to late Professor Braj Bhushan Pandey, who actually produced these guidelines for the pavement engineering community in India. His works and persona, they are in fact motivation for many, and including me, obviously. And we can never forget his contribution in not only in flexible pavement, but in different spheres of pavement engineering. So with this note and with this remembrance about him, let us start with the presentation. So just a small acknowledgement. I took most of the tables, equations from IRC 37 2018 in the way it is. Some of the images which I have taken are from Google Images. Okay, so in this session, we'll be looking on the following aspects, because in the first presentation, we have already covered some of the talking about some of the tools which are actually required to understand the design of flexible pavement. Some of the tools which are not, you can say, well answered in other in the codal specification. So I tried to cover those aspects. Now in this presentation, the way it is in IRC 37. We'll start first with the development of IRC 37, a very brief, outline about how IRC 37 came in its present form. We will talk again about pavement design. This will be a recap to what we have just covered in the previous lecture in the first half. Then we will start with layer properties, in which we will touch upon all the layers which are which we usually use for the construction of flexible pavement. We will talk about these properties which are important for design, and what are the factors on considering those properties. We will also talk about stage construction, maybe not in detail, but yes, in brief. We will talk about perpetual pavement, which is again one of the very interesting area. And then at last, where I would like to spend maybe half an hour with you on the demonstration of IIT Pave, using some example which we will take. So we'll take some example, and then we will look on how IIT Pave actually works, which is the which is a tool to find out the stresses and strains in different locations in a flexible pavement using the layered theory or the linear elastic theory. Okay, so the first draft of this code, IRC 37, it came in 1970, and it was revised in 1984. Now these two guidelines, that is 1970 and 1984, they were based on empirical design method, which if you remember, I told you in the last lecture also. This was one of the initial methods where the CBR of the subgrade, it was used to find the thicknesses of different layers in the flexible pavement. So if someone could tell me what is the CBR of the soil where I am going to construct the pavement, the code will be able to tell that how much thickness above the subgrade is required, and which layers should be laid over the subgrade. Okay. Now in the 70 version, there is a slight difference between the 84 and 70 version. So in the 70 version, the traffic was defined in terms of commercial vehicles per day. So again, I recall that commercial vehicle, what is a commercial vehicle? It indicates a vehicle with laden weight more than 3 tons. So because we design our pavement only for commercial vehicles. In 84, the traffic was not represented in terms of commercial vehicles or the number of commercial vehicles. Rather, it was represented in terms of equivalent standard axle load. So we had to calculate the VDF, and then we have to find out the equivalent standard axle load. Okay. Uh, well, it was in 2001 that we shifted to mechanistic empirical design method. So in this method, the response of the pavement in terms of stresses, strains, or deflections, it was obtained using mechanics. So specifically, we use linear elastic theory, and the deterioration or the failure, it was quantified in terms of performance models for fatigue cracking and rutting. Now this part is the empirical part in the mechanistic empirical pavement design process. Okay. The linear elastic analysis, which is usually done to find out the stresses and strains, it was actually automated using an in-house developed software in IIT Kharagpur. So it was initially named as FPAVE, which was further renamed as IIT PAVE. Okay. Now this development, as I said took place as a part of two big projects, R6 and R56, which were sponsored by Ministry of Road Transport and Highways. Okay. So the traffic level up to 150 MSA was considered, which means you can design the pavement up to a design traffic of 150 MSA. In contrast to 30 MSA, which were used in previous documents, which means in 1984, we could design the pavement only up to 30 MSA. So it was observed that the traffic is being increasing in the pavement in India with, throughout the year. So they thought of, going towards higher traffic. In 2012, options for new layers, including cement treated bases, cement treated sub bases, emulsion and foam bitumen modified RAP bases. RAP stands for reclaimed asphalt pavement, and crack relief layers, they were introduced. So these new layers were introduced in 2012. Additionally, the performance models for fatigue and rutting were provided for 80% and 90% reliability levels, which we have already seen in the previous presentation. Provisions for using different binder grades in bituminous layer were also suggested. Previously, we used to construct the pavement typically using VG30 only, but in the new versions after 2012, there were options to use PMB, CRMB, VG40, and so on. Okay. So basically this 2012 version of IRC 37, it opened horizon for wide range of options in pavement design. Now this code was recently revised based on certain suggestions which were received in the 2012 version. This code was fine-tuned with supplementary discussions on various aspects of pavement design. I find this new code, that is the 2018, a very, very well written and easy to understand document. You can read if someone is interested in pavement design. So Professor K.S. Reddy of IIT Kharagpur and his team, so they have done a very great work in making this document, simple to understand. So this is just a repetition of what we covered in the previous presentation. So what is a pavement design, which we have already defined, that we have to design the pavement or select the layer thicknesses such that the value of I'm sorry, this is written maybe in opposite manner. Yes, obviously the value of T is less than the allowable traffic. So the predicted traffic should be less than the allowable traffic. Okay, where NF/R is written, NF indicates number of repetitions corresponding to the fatigue model, that is allowable traffic for fatigue, and number of repetitions for rutting model, that is the allowable number of repetitions corresponding to rutting failure. So because there are two performance models, one will be NF and the other will be NR. Okay, so this is the basic equation for calculating the predicted traffic, is not it? This we have already covered. So let us just quickly, look in what these parameters are. T is the predicted traffic. ADT is the average daily traffic, which we get from the traffic survey. N is the design life, for example, 20 years. R is the rate of increase in traffic. So we have to find it from actual data, or sometimes we assume a value of 5% or 7.5%. VDF is vehicle damage factor, which is used to convert the repetition of any axle to the repetition of standard axle. And LDF is introduced to see the aspect of lateral traffic distribution, because we design our pavement only for the wheel parts, and not all the vehicles will be moving exactly on the wheel path. So there will be some lateral distribution, because of which LDF is introduced in this equation. Now we have, so this was the predicted traffic. Now we have another equation for NF, which is the allowable number of repetitions of equivalent standard axle load, so as to resist fatigue cracking. And how is fatigue cracking defined? That the pavement should not have more than 20% crack. So this is the number of load repetition of ESL before which 20%, after which 20% crack will be visible in the pavement. So this is the allowable traffic for fatigue. K1, K2, K3. So these are regression coefficients. E is the modulus of the bituminous layer. And epsilon T, it is the tensile strain at the bottom of bituminous layer. So this tensile strain at the bottom of bituminous layer, how do we find it? We find it using the IIT PAVE software or doing a linear elastic analysis. What we do, we keep a 40 kilonewton dual wheel load on the top of the pavement with a known tire pressure, with a known radii, and we use the linear elastic theory to find out the strain at the bottom of the bituminous layer. Now, on what factors will this strain depend? The strain will change depending on the modulus of the different layers, the Poisson's ratio of the different layers, and the thicknesses of the different layers. So if we change the thickness, the value of epsilon T will change. If we change the modulus, the value of the epsilon T will change. However, Poisson's ratio do not have a very significant effect, but still it has an effect, so I have mentioned it here. Then we have another model, a similar model, but this time this is the allowable traffic for rutting. Okay. Then we have K1 and K2, which are regression coefficients. And what is epsilon V? It is the vertical compressive strain at the top of the subgrade. Okay. Similar to epsilon T, this vertical compressive strain is also a function of layer thicknesses, layer modulus, and the Poisson's ratio of different layers. Okay. So I hope this overview is clear to you that there are three things. One is predicted traffic, and we have two types of allowable traffic, one for rutting and one for fatigue. Okay. Now let us start talking about the number of options we have in IRC 37. So in IRC 37, basically there are three functional layers above the subgrade. So subgrade is the weakest component. So we want to protect the subgrade from further deterioration. For that, we give three functional layers above the subgrade, that is subbase, base, and a bituminous layer. Now, subbase and base can be made of different types of materials or different types of gradation, you can say. We can have a granular subbase and a granular base. We can have cement treated subbases also. Similarly, we can have cement treated bases also. And we can have a combination. For example, the subbase can be granular and the base can be cement treated, or the subbase can be cement treated and the base can be granular. So we can have a combination also. In base specifically, there is one more option which the code has given. That is, in the base, we can also put emulsion or foamed bitumen treated granular layer, or it can be, or we can also have wrap. That is, wrap we get from the existing flexible pavement. When the pavement becomes old, we scrap the surface to top layer, and whatever we get is the wrap. So we can put wrap also in the base layer by treating it with emulsion or foamed bitumen. Or we can have a combination also, that is some percentage of wrap and some percentage of virgin aggregates. Okay. Then comes the bituminous layer. So usually bituminous layer is laid in 2 to 3 layers. So we can have a, so this layer which you see here, let me take a pen to explain it to you. So this layer, it can be made up of a binder course. and then a base bituminous course. Okay, so this layer itself can be laid as two different layers. Okay, and or sometimes it is laid as a single layer. And then we have a bituminous wearing course or the surface course, which is another layer. Now, each functional layer which we have discussed, they can be compacted in one or more layers. Okay, it's not necessarily that this whole thickness will be constructed in a single go. Obviously, there can be multiple. Even suppose we have a sub-base, suppose this is a filter layer, this filter layer can be compacted in two different layers depending on the thickness. So this minimum thickness of compaction by the roller, it depends on the type of roller we are using and on the nominal maximum aggregate size of the particular gradation. Okay. We also have a option of crack relief layer or SAMI, specifically when CTB is provided. So this CTB, which is cement treated base, this can, if we do not provide a crack relief layer or something called as stress absorbing member interlayer, which is SAMI, there is a possibility of reflection cracking. So what is reflection cracking? Suppose we have a cemented layer here. So because of shrinkage and some load, this will crack. Suppose we place a bituminous layer directly over it. So what will happen if bituminous layer is placed directly over it? This point, so when it is loaded, this point will induce pin stresses here, which can be very high in magnitude, and this can further propagate to the surface. Okay, and you will see cracking on the surface of the pavement. So that is why what we do, if a CTB is there, we provide a crack relief layer. So crack relief layer is nothing but a granular layer. So you can understand that a granular layer cannot crack, is not it? So even when this layer has cracked, this point, they are not able to propagate because there are voids in the granular layer. These voids will capture this transfer of stress. Okay, so we will not have reflection cracking, and on the top of this, you can have a bituminous layer. Okay, so instead of this granular layer, we can also have a SAMI. We will discuss about SAMI. What is a SAMI? This is basically a thin application of polymer modified binder and some single sized aggregate chips. Okay, we will discuss about it. So let us start discussing about all the functional layers one by one from the perspective of design, like perspective of design as per IRC 37 2018. So what is subgrade? It is the top 500 mm of the pavement. Okay, it is the top 500 mm of the pavement. It can be an in situ material, the same soil which you have at the site. It can be a borrow material, that is, if the present soil is not satisfying some minimum requirement, you can bring the soil from some other location and put on the subgrade. It can also be stabilized. Suppose the existing soil is not meeting the desired criteria, you can stabilize it using a lime or a cement or any other additive. Okay. Now this subgrade, ideally, it should be compacted to minimum 97% of the modified Proctor density in the lab. So for the soil sample which you are using, first you will do a modified Proctor test in the lab. You will find out the maximum dry density, and in the site, you should compact the subgrade at least to minimum 97% of that particular density which you have achieved in the lab. Okay, at the optimum moisture content. Okay. Now, what properties are desired apart from, see, one is compaction, that is you require some minimum density here. So minimum density requirement is there. Okay. Then comes resilient modulus. Now, why is resilient modulus required? Why not density is sufficient? Resilient modulus is required because this is an input in pavement analysis. This is an input in pavement analysis. Without resilient modulus, we cannot do the pavement analysis because stresses and strains depend on the modulus of the respective layer. And how is the resilient modulus test performed? Ideally, it is performed using a repeated triaxial test in the lab, but this test is a little complicated. You require sophisticated equipment and some trained personnel to do this test. That is why what researchers have done, they have established a correlation between the resilient modulus and the value of CBR. So CBR is the California bearing ratio, which is a very easy test to perform. It is the ratio of the load to some specific penetration. So it is a ratio basically with respect to some standard material. So you will take the ratio of the load and then you will find the CBR. So CBR is very easy to perform in the lab. So people have established correlation of CBR with the triaxial apparatus and to find out the modulus. Okay. Now, how is CBR determined? Now, like on what moisture content should be there for making CBR samples, how it should be compacted and so on. So CBR is to be determined for critical condition of the pavement, which means the moisture content which you are using, it is not the optimum moisture content which you have found from the Proctor test. This is a confusion sometimes. So CBR test, there are two things. Suppose you know the variation of moisture in the lab. Suppose you know the variation of in the site. So you make the soil samples for CBR at the field moisture content. Okay. Typically just after the monsoons. Suppose you don't have the data. So what you do, you compact the CBR at the optimum. 4 days soaking done because you are expecting that in the site when you are constructing the subgrade, you are using the optimum moisture content. But with the passage of time, there will be variation in moisture and your subgrade will no longer have this optimum moisture content retained for a very long time. So there will be fluctuation in the moisture content in the subgrade. To account for this variation, what you do, you soak the sample for 4 days and do a soaked CBR test. Now, for any pavement section which you are constructing, just making one CBR is not good enough. So ideally, we have to take per kilometer, let us say 3 to 4 samples or 5 samples. Okay, conduct the CBR test on it. And for that particular homogeneous section, we will take the 90th percentile value, okay, as the design CBR value. After we determine the design CBR value, we can find out the resilient modulus using these two equations. Okay, so first equation is applicable when the CBR is less than equal to 5%, and the second equation is applicable when the CBR is more than 5%. So there are two equations, and this is a very, very widely used equation, not only in India but in different countries also. So well established equation. Now comes the concept of effective CBR. Now it may happen that you have an embankment and then you have a subgrade, and there is a considerable difference between the CBR of these two layers. Okay. In that case, suppose if you have a very strong embankment and the CBR of subgrade is low, you can actually calculate the effective CBR. Okay. But what if you are calculating the effective CBR, if corresponding to that CBR, if the modulus is coming to be more than 100 MPa, okay, then you will restrict the design value to 100 MPa. So it is limited to a maximum value of 100 MPa. And how do you determine the effective CBR or the effective modulus? You do a layered analysis. So suppose this is the two layer E1 and E2. So this E1 is a function of CBR of soil. This E2 is also a function of CBR. We can use this equation to find out the value of E1 and E2 if we know the CBR values. So suppose they are very different from each other. So what you will take a two-layer system. You will put a single wheel 40 kilonewton load with a tire pressure of 0.56 MPa, and you will find out the deflection at this point using IIT pave, that at just at the center of the tire at the surface. Okay. Then what you will do, you will assume a single layer system with some equivalent modulus E. Okay. You have, for the same deflection, you will use Bozenick's equation. So this is a Bozenick equation for elastic half space. You have this value of deflection, put this deflection here. P is the pressure, which is 0.56 MPa. A is the radius of the tire, which is also taken as standard. Mu is the Poisson's ratio, which can be taken as 0.35, and you can find out the value of MRS. So this MRS is the combined modulus of this two layer, which is the effective modulus. Okay. And for pavement design, flexible pavement design, it is recommended that the soil should have a minimum CBR of 5%. So these are the requirements for subgrade. Now let us move to subbase, the next layer. Okay. So subbase has three main functions. The first function is to provide a strong support for the compaction of granular layer. which means there will be more layers which will come above the subbase, and there will be construction traffic moving continuously. So your subbase should be strong enough to take this construction traffic which is going to come over it. Okay. The second function is to protect the subgrade from overstressing. So you want to have sufficient thickness of granular subbase such that when stresses are coming, they can be kept lower in the subgrade. And the third function, which is a very important function, is to serve as a drainage and filter layer. So what is a drainage and a filter layer? So filter layer, suppose this is the subbase and you are constructing it in 2 layers, let us say. Okay, so this is the filter layer. The lower layer will be filter layer. The upper layer will be drainage layer. So filter layer, it will prevent the the movement of fines from the subgrade to the top layer. It will prevent the movement. And drainage layer, it will prevent the movement of water from the surface to the subgrade. So you don't want water to go to the subgrade because you know that your subgrade material is highly sensitive to change in moisture content. So whenever there is some water infiltration, you want this drainage layer to take out the water before it reaches the subgrade. Okay, so that is the function of the drainage layer. Now, if design is permitting us, if there is a scope in the design, then I should construct the subbase necessarily in 2 layers. There should be a drainage layer and there should be a filter layer. Now, the gradation of this drainage layer and the filter layer should be taken from Ministry of Road Transport and Highways guidelines. So there are 6 gradations available for subbase, G1 to G6. Okay. So for drainage layer, we will take G3 and G4 as the gradation. For filter layer, we can take G1, G2, G5 and G6. Now, if the design is not permitting the construction of 2 separate layers in subbase, we can go for a single subbase layer, okay, which will act both as a drainage and a filter layer. So this is called as a drainage cum filter layer. So in that case, we will use the gradation G5 or G6. Okay. There is another option that we can also use geotextiles and geogrids as a filter and drainage layer. In that case, we will have to see the specification of IRC SP 59. Okay. So very recently, IRC SP 59 has come online. So we have to look into those specifications. So this is about granular subbase. Then comes another option, which I have initially told you, that is the cement treated subbase. So if we are using cement treated subbase in the subbase, then we will use the gradation of G4. So G4 is the recommended gradation and the minimum thickness should be 200 mm. The minimum thickness of CTSB should be 200 mm. What about the minimum thickness of drainage and filter layer in case they are granular in nature? So the minimum thickness of drainage and filter layer separately is 100 mm each. So a drainage layer should be at least 100 mm and the filter layer should be at least 100 mm. In case we are not able to give a 200 mm layer of granular subbase, single layer, which is a filter cup drainage layer, in that case, the minimum thickness should be 150 mm. Now, the minimum thickness does not necessarily depend on these criteria. There are some other criteria also. So what are those criteria? That the minimum thickness should be at least 2.5 times the nominal maximum aggregate size. Okay. So you can see that, for example, take this gradation. The nominal maximum aggregate size is 26.5 mm. So at least 2.5 into 26.5 mm should be provided, subjected to a minimum of 100 mm, which means if after calculation this values comes to be less than 100 mm, then you are bound to provide at least 100 mm. Okay. The next criteria for determining the thickness is based on certain analysis procedure. So the thickness should be computed based on the movement of construction traffic. So what you will do, in just like doing a normal pavement analysis, you will consider approximately 10,000 equivalent standard axle load. Okay. You will use this criteria. NR is equal to K1 into 1 by epsilon Z to the power K2. Okay. So what you will take a 2-layer system. So this is the subbase you want to construct and this is the subgrade, is not it? You will keep a dual wheel load over it, 40 kilonewton, 0.56 MPa tire pressure. and you will find out the value of epsilon z at the top of subgrade. Okay, you will find out the value of epsilon z at the top of subgrade. So you will get epsilon z from here, and in this equation you will put 10,000 in place of nr, and you will find out epsilon z critical. Okay, this epsilon z which you have got from analysis, it should be less than epsilon z critical. If it is not less, what you will do, you will increase the thickness. Okay, so by doing some trials, you can find out what is that thickness for which epsilon z is less than epsilon z critical. Okay, then you can take the maximum of all the values which you are getting. Okay, I hope this is clear to you. So now let us look into the modulus requirement, that for granular subbase, what resilient modulus should you take? Okay, so if the subbase is granular in nature, then the modulus of the granular layer, it is a function of modulus of the subgrade and the thickness of the granular layer. Okay, and this is the equation which we use, where modulus of granular layer is equal to 0.2 times h is the thickness of the granular layer, to the power 0.45 into mr support. What is mr support? Mr support is the modulus of the support below the layer for which we are determining the modulus. Suppose you have like this, right? Suppose this is the granular layer, granular subbase. So suppose this is the thickness of hi, and suppose you have subbase as subgrade as E1 and embankment as E2. So for this, first you will determine the effective modulus. Suppose it comes as EI. Okay, and then this EI you will use in here, and you will find out the modulus of the granular layer. Okay, in case the granular layer is reinforced, with geosynthetics, then you will use the same equation, but after using this equation, you will multiply this modulus which you are getting using a modulus improvement factor and layer coefficient ratio. So this you will get from IRC-SP 59 based on the type of geosynthetic you are using. Okay, so you will use this equation and then increase the modulus by multiplying it with some modulus improvement factor suggested in IRC-SP 59. Let us talk about cement treated subbase. So this was about granular and geosynthetic reinforced. What about cement treated? For cement treated subbase, the elastic modulus we use for design, it is a function of the value of unconfined compression strength. Okay, so the CTSB should have a minimum 7-day UCS of 1.5 to 3 MPa. Okay, and the design can be looked into IRC-SP 89. It has to be noted that the lab strength for which we are designing or for which we are determining the UCS, it should be at least 1.5 times more than the expected fill strength. After we determine the UCS in the lab, we can find out the modulus using this relationship, that E is equal to 1000 into 28-day UCS for the CTSB sample. But using this equation, you will get very high values, maybe around 2000 MPa. Okay, maybe around 2000 MPa, but you will not use this value. Why? Because you are expecting that cement treated subbase will have some shrinkage cracks after construction, because some construction traffic will be moving over it. So considering that, you expect that the modulus at which it is constructed will get reduced after the final construction. So you take a design value of 600 MPa to be on the conservative side. So 600 MPa is used for design. The Poisson's ratio is taken as 0.25 because it is a relatively stiffer layer. If it is a granular subbase, you take the Poisson's ratio as 0.35. Okay. Another problem with cement treated subbase is that at least 3 to 7 day curing is required before next layer is laid. Okay, if you find that after 3 days of curing you are not able to achieve the desired strength in the field, then you should increase the curing time to 7 days. Okay, so this is a very big challenge in practical scenario when the traffic cannot be diverted and you cannot wait for 3 to 7 days before the construction of next layer. So this is a very challenging aspect for the engineers. Okay, I'm sorry. Okay. Yeah. Now coming to the unbound granular layer, okay, or the base layer basically. So in base layer also we have several options. The first option is a conventional granular sub base, a granular base. So what options we have? We can put a wet mix macadam, we can put a waterbound macadam, we can put a crusher run macadam, or we can also put a reclaimed concrete. So I think these layers were discussed by Professor Praveen Kumar in the first lecture today. Okay, so we have many options for base layer. Typically these days people are using wet mix macadam. So the minimum thickness granular base should be at least 150 mm. This is the minimum requirement. If granular base is placed over cement treated sub base, suppose you have cement treated sub base CTSB, and over this you are placing a granular base, then we will directly take some modulus of granular base, and that is taken as 300 MPa in case we are making granular base using some gravelly materials, or we can take as 350 MPa if we are using crushed rock for constructing the granular base. Okay. Now, what if the granular base is geosynthetic reinforced? Okay. So there can be two conditions. One condition is the granular base can be geosynthetic reinforced, but the granular subbase is granular in nature. Okay, but the subbase is granular in nature. Another case is both the granular base and granular subbase, they are granular, they are reinforced with geosynthetic. And the other case is that the granular subbase is reinforced, but the granular base is a granular base. So that we have discussed here, that if we have a granular base over cement treated subbase, then how do you determine the modulus? Now let us discuss what if we are having a geosynthetic reinforced base on a granular subbase. Okay, so what we will do here, okay, what you will do here, you will use this equation where H is the thickness of granular base. But what is MR support here? For MR support, what you will do, what is support here? Support is the granular subbase is the support, and below that you have subgrade. Is not it? Below that you have a single layer of subgrade. So you will find out MR support for this combined layer. And how you will do that? Using the same method by which we are doing effective CBR. So first you will take a two-layer system. You have granular subbase here and you have subgrade here. You will put a single wheel load here. You will found deflection here. Okay. And for this granular subbase, what is the modulus? This you can find out using this equation again. Okay. And then you will convert this layer into a single layer by using the Bosnick's equation. Okay, by using the Bosnick equation. So in this way, you will find out the modulus of the granular subbase layer. Okay. Okay. And if both are reinforced, you will use again the same method, but for granular subbase, you will again use the layer coefficient ratio and the modulus improvement factor as suggested in IRCSP 59. Okay. Now comes the cement treated bases. So cement treated bases can be cementitious stabilized aggregates. It can be lime fly ash soil layer, or it can be a soil cement composite. Okay. The aggregate gradation which you will use for cement treated bases will be as per table 404 of Ministry of Road Transport and Highways. Okay. The minimum thickness of cement treated base is 100 mm. Just a small recall that for granular base, it was 150 mm. Okay. Here also the modulus of the cement treated base, they are dependent on the unconfined compressive strength value. Okay, so the minimum UCS of the cement treated base should be in the range of 4.5 to 7 MPa in 7 to 28 days. So this 7-day, it is for cement. So after 7 days, in case of cement stabilized bases, after 7 days, the minimum UCS should be in the range of 4.5 to 7 MPa. And if you are not using cement and you are using other pozzolanic material, for example, if you are using fly ash, you have lime or any other pozzolana material. So I'm sure every one of you know that pozzolanic material, their strength increases with time, which means in comparison to cement, they require more time for complete development of its strength. In that case, after 28 days, this minimum requirement should be satisfied. Okay. And again, similar to the cement treated sub base, the lab strength should be 1.5 times more than the field strength. Okay. Now, here another important aspect which is typically ignored, what we have seen, is the requirement of durability. So, suppose you want to design a CTB. So what you will do in the lab, you will start with, let us say, 1% cement. You will do the UCS. Suppose it is not satisfying this criteria after 7 days, you will increase the cement content to, let us say, 2% and so on. Okay. So suppose, let us say 2.5%, you are getting this required strength. So for you, the optimum cement content for cement treated base is 2.5%. Okay. So what you will do, you will make the sample at 2.5% and you will also do a durability test. Okay. So durability test can be a wetting or drying test or a freezing thawing test. When you are constructing or using the cement treated base in cold regions, snow-bound regions, you do a freezing and thawing test. If you are doing in other tropical areas, you use a wetting or drying test. So typically we use wetting drying test. Okay. So you do the wetting drying test, and in the wetting drying test, the loss in weight after 12 cycles of wetting and drying, it should not be less than 14%. Suppose at this 2.5%, this value comes to be more than 14%, which means you cannot use 2.5% as the optimum cement content. Maybe you will have to increase the cement content, or maybe you will have to do you will have to take some other measures to solving this problem. But this should be mandatorily done. Okay, durability criteria. But this durability criteria is not required if cement treated sub bases are used. This is required only when cement treated bases are used. Okay. Okay. So once you have determined the UCS, the modulus can be calculated using the same equation, that is 1000 into 28 days UCS. Again, here you will get a very high value. You can get a value of around 10,000 also. But again, since you are expecting that after the completion of construction, there will already be some cracks because of the movement of construction traffic and temperature changes, a design value of 5,000 MPa is taken to be on the conservative sides. Okay. And since this is a cement treated layer, the Poisson's ratio is taken as 0.25. Here, for cement treated bases, at least 7 days of curing is required before the next layer is laid over it. Now this brings another challenge for cement treated base if you are not able to divert the traffic. Now here another quality control issue is that sometimes we have observed that with cement treated bases, they construct and they allow the traffic to move over the pavement before giving sufficient time for curing. In that case, whatever you are expecting it to perform, it will not perform. So quality control during the site, during the construction, is a very mandatory step to achieve the anticipated performance. At the end of design period. Okay. So for curing, you can use bitumen emulsion, you can use wet jute mat or any other procedure. Now, if you remember from our morning discussion, what else we require? Because if there is a CTB, we have to do a cumulative fatigue damage analysis. And if you remember that in the cumulative fatigue damage analysis, there was something called as the stress ratio. Okay, and there was something called as modulus of rupture. So what is modulus of rupture? It is the strength of the cement treated base in bending. Okay, so you require a flexural strength for fatigue analysis. Okay, so how you will find the now this is not required for cement treated sub bases, only for cement treated bases. Okay, so modulus of rupture is taken approximately as 20% of the 28-day UCS. So 28-day UCS you are already determining here. Just take the 20% of this, that value, and that can be approximately taken as the modulus of rupture of the cement treated base. But if you are doing 20%, which means 0.2 into 28-day UCS, okay, this should not be more than this value. If they are more than this value, then you will take this value for design. Okay, if for cementitious stabilized aggregate you are getting 20% of UCS more than 1.4, then for design purposes, to be on the conservative side, you use a value of 1.4. Okay, similarly for other type of stabilized bases. So I hope this is also clear to you. Now we come to the crack relief layer. Okay, so crack relief layer, they are actually dense graded crushed aggregates. So in fact, crack relief layer is nothing but a crushed or a well graded or a dense graded WMM layer. Okay, and the minimum thickness of crack relief layer is 100 mm. Okay, now the modulus of the crack relief layer is taken just by a thumb rule, and that is equal to 450 MPa. Okay, so this is based on some testing done on such type of layer. So an approximate value of 450 MPa is taken. Okay, and the crack relief layer is compacted to 100% of the modified Proctor density. Okay, instead of crack relief layer, in order to resist the reflection cracking, we can also provide stress absorbing member interlayer, that is SAMI. So what is SAMI? SAMI is nothing but a combination of elastomeric modified binder, which is covered by 11.2 mm aggregates. Then the other option which we have for base, as I mentioned, is the emulsion or foam bitumen treated wrap bases. Okay, so in case we are using emulsion, we have to use a slow setting to emulsion. If we are using foam bitumen, the foaming should be done using a VG30 bitumen, and then it is treated with wrap, and the wrap can be made with or without any use of virgin aggregates. Okay, the minimum thickness of this base layer is 100 mm. Okay, and the strength or the modulus is taken as 800 MPa. Now this also, if you do it in the lab, you get higher values, maybe 1500 MPa, but to be on the conservative side, a value of 100 MPa is being proposed by IRC 37. Now for emulsion treated or foam bitumen treated base layers, the mix design should be done, and the mix design should satisfy this criteria, that the indirect tensile strength should be at least 100 kPa after soaking in the water, and 225 kPa in dry condition at 25 degrees Celsius. So this criteria should be satisfied before you can use the emulsion or foam bitumen. Okay, now we come to finally the bituminous layers. Let us see the specification outline for bituminous layers. Okay, so this bituminous layer, it consists of bituminous surfacing cores and a bituminous base or binder cores. And this is the table which is given by IRC 37 for recommending the types of mixes we will use for different cases. So these cases depend on the level of traffic. You can see if the traffic is more than 50 MSA, then we have three options. We can use a stone mastric asphalt, SMA. We can use a gap graded rubberized binder mix, GGRB, and we can use a bituminous concrete. If we are using SMA, it is the type of binder which we will use will be a modified bitumen, a polymer modified bitumen, or VG40. If you rubberized binder mix, as the name suggests, we have to use a crumb rubber modified bitumen. If you are using bituminous concrete, we have to use a polymer modified bitumen. Okay. The type of base course is DBM and the bitumen type is VG40. So for surface course, this is the option. And for binder course, we have to use DBM with VG40. When the traffic is between 20 to 50 MSA, again, we have similar options, 3 options here. Same type of binder and same type of mix. Okay. If the traffic is less than 20 MSA, then we can have thin mixes also, like semi-dense bituminous concrete, pre-mix carpet, mixed sill surfacing, surface dressing, and so on. For less than 20 MSA, we actually don't need a very good structural layer. A thin layer should be sufficient to take the load which is going to come over it. And the type of bitumen can be VG40 or VG30. Okay. If here you have to remember that if the thickness of the bituminous layer is less than 40 mm, then VG30 should be used instead of VG40. Why? Because thin bituminous layer, they behave like a membrane. Okay, so they will deflect, they will come back to their same position. So a low viscosity grade binder would offer more flexibility so that the material will have more elastic nature. Okay. For less than 20 MSA, for base or binder course, we can use DBM or we can also use bituminous macadam using VG40 or VG30. Okay, so this is the requirement on the type of mixes based on different traffic criteria. Okay. Okay. So here again, you have to remember that thin layers, when you are using thin layers in the surface course like pre-mix carpet, mixed sill surfacing, or you are using surface dressing. So these are non-structural layers. And while doing pavement analysis, you will not consider the properties of this layer. Okay. And if you are designing the pavement or constructing the pavement in snowbound areas, then you, instead of using VG40 or VG30, VG10 is recommended. Okay. Now let us talk about the resilient modulus to be considered for the bituminous layer. Okay. So this resilient modulus of bituminous layer, it is a function of various mixed parameters. And these values are recommended at 35 degrees Celsius because our pavement, basically for most of the tropical locations, the design temperature is 35 degrees Celsius. And the modulus of the bituminous material, because bituminous mixes are viscoelastic in nature, they will change based on the temperature. Okay, they will change based on the temperature. So they are sensitive to the temperature. So the modulus which we want to use in the design, it should be corresponding to 35 degrees Celsius. And if we are constructing the pavement again in snowbound areas, so the resilient modulus which we will use in design should be corresponding to 20 degrees Celsius. Here you see bituminous layer, as I said, they are constructed in 2 layers, right? So this is the binder course, this is the surface course. So the resilient modulus we will use in the, which we will use in the fatigue equation, that is NF equal to K1 into 1 by epsilon T to the power K2 into 1 by E to the power K3. So this is the fatigue equation. So the resilient modulus which we want to put here, it is basically for bottom DBM. It should be corresponding to the bottom DBM. So we will have to find out the resilient modulus for this layer and not the surface layer. Okay, and not the surface layer. So 37, they have done some preliminary analysis and they have recommended these values. So you can see that our design temperature is 35 degrees Celsius. So depending on the type of mix, we can choose the value of modulus from here. But you see, these are the maximum values, which means, which we have seen that there is a tendency of engineers not doing the actual test of resilient modulus, rather taking the modulus from this table, which is actually not recommended. So this table should be used or serve as just as a guideline. And these are the maximum values which are obtained based on certain number of samples which were tested in the labs. Okay. Now here another important point is that the DBM should be constructed in 1 or 2 layers. So as I said, the DBM itself can have 2 layers. So if the DBM is constructed in 2 layers, the bottom should be, there are 2 gradations in MORTH. So the bottom should be DBM 1 and the top should be DBM 2. Okay. So when we are doing the mixed design of DBM in the lab, usually what we do in Marshall mixed design, that we find the optimum binder content corresponding to a 4% air void. Okay. But when we are, what IRC recommends, that when you are doing mixed design of DBM in the lab, you find out the optimum binder content, okay, at not at 4%, but at 3% or 3.5%. So if the DBM is constructed in 2 layers, then you find out the optimum binder content corresponding to 3% air void. And if the DBM is constructed in single layer, you find out the optimum binder content corresponding to an air void of 3.5%. Why do we do that? So that we can increase the volume of bitumen in this bottom layer. And why is it required? Because the bottom DBM is the one which is resisting the fatigue strains which are coming on it. And binder provides durability to the mix. So more is the binder, better will be the resistance in fatigue. Okay. And the another challenging requirement for DBM, which is suggested by IRC 37, is that it should be compacted to a air void of 4% in case we are using 3% as the design air void, and 4.5% as when we are considering 3.5% as the design air void. Okay, so this is the compaction in the field. So in the field, we should compact it to these air void content. Okay. Then let us talk about perpetual pavement or long life pavement. So what is perpetual pavement? Perpetual pavement are constructed or recommended only when the design traffic is more than 300 million standard axle load. And it is expected that perpetual pavement will have a life of more than 50 years. So what is a perpetual pavement? How do we define it? Perpetual pavements are pavements in which the horizontal tensile strain at the bottom of the bituminous layer is less than 70 microns or 70 microstrains, and the vertical strain at the top of subgrade is 200 microstrain at 20 degrees Celsius. So it has been evaluated previously by other researchers that if this criteria is satisfied, then that pavement will never crack and will never have rutting on it. Okay, so these are, but the cost of this pavement will obviously be very high initially. Okay, so that is why they are to be constructed only in special conditions. Okay, so but in India, as I said, this is at 20 degrees Celsius, which is recommended by Asphalt Institute. But in India, we are designing the pavement at 35 degrees Celsius. So for us, this value of 70 is actually 80, and this value of 200 is same as 200. Okay, so we will design the pavement, a perpetual pavement, such that the tensile strain at the bottom of the bituminous layer is less than 80 microstrains, and the vertical compressive strain at the top of subgrade is less than 200 microstrains. Okay, but here we have to remember that the initial cost of this pavement will be higher, very high in comparison to a conventional pavement, but the long-term benefits are there, specifically when the design traffic is very high. Okay. Now, if we are constructing a pavement in frost susceptible area, so we have to find a solution such that capillary rise of water is not there in the subgrade. So for that, we have to increase the pavement thickness to at least 40 mm. So this is specifically for frost susceptible areas. Now, finally, let us also talk about stage construction. So what is stage construction? Sometimes what happens that for a particular location, the increase in traffic growth can be very uncertain. So at the beginning of the design, maybe there is uncertainty on how the traffic will grow. Okay. So taking any arbitrary value of rate of increase of traffic can lead to wrong design. Okay. Also, there can be locations where in the tender requirement, there is subsequent requirement for maintenance. Okay. In that cases, we can go for stage construction. Suppose the design life is 20 years. So maybe we can design the pavement for 10 years initially. And after 10 years, we can provide an overlay so as to satisfy the traffic requirement for the next 10 years. So if we are going for stage construction, the base and subbase, should be provided for full design life. So suppose our design life is 20 years. So we will provide the base and subbase corresponding to 20 years of traffic. Okay. Only the bituminous layer will be provided for the particular stage, or maybe if it is 10 years, then we'll provide for 10 years. If it is 5 years, we'll provide for 5 years. But here also we have to remember that when we are providing, suppose you have decided that you will go for 5 years stage construction. Your design life is 20 years and you will go for 5 years stage construction. So when you go for 5 years stage construction, if you use this equation, right? 365 into ADT into 1 plus R to the power n minus 1 by R into VDF into LDF. So n you put as 5 and you find out what is the value of T. For this value of T, you find out what is epsilon T, epsilon Z, and what should be the thickness of the top layer, okay, for bituminous layer. But we don't use this direct process. So if your stage is 5 years, we have to design the bituminous layer such that at the end of 5 years, at least 40% life should be remaining. Okay, this means that it should not happen that after 5 years your top layer has completely deteriorated. Okay, so you have to actually, even in the stage construction, you have to design corresponding to a higher stage than what you are designing. So suppose you were supposed to design for 5 years, but the value of T, whatever you calculate for 5 years, you should multiply it with 1.67 to get the design traffic. Okay, why do you do this? Because at the end of 5 years, you want your pavement to have at least 40% of the remaining life. Okay, and in stage construction, another important point is that if you are using cement treated bases or cement treated sub bases in lower layers, then in those pavement, stage construction is not permitted. Okay, stage construction is not permitted. Well, I think this is all about the different layers, the material properties, the reason we choose the material properties. You can also see the examples in the annexure of IRC 37 2018. So with this background and with the presentation which I gave in the first half, let us actually look into the demonstration of IIT PAVE. So before I give you the demonstration, I thought of giving the demonstration taking some example. Okay, so very recently with some of my friends in PWD, UPPWD, we were solving a problem. So I have those values in front of me, so we can use the same problem. So let us say you want to design the pavement for a target MSA. The traffic or the design traffic is 4.3 MSA. This is the design traffic. Okay. When I put this design traffic in this equation, NF is equal to K1 into 1 by epsilon T to the power K2 into 1 by E to the power K3, where I know what is the value of K1, K2 and K3, and the value of E, that is the modulus of the bituminous layer, it is taken as 2000 MPa. Okay, and I will put this T here. I will put this T here and I will find out what is epsilon T. So epsilon T, if you do this calculation using that equation, 80% reliability equation, you will find this epsilon T allowable is 404 into 10 is to power minus 6. So just remember this value. Okay, that whatever strain you get from the actual analysis, it should be less than 404 into 10 is to power minus 6. Okay, then again what I will do now, I will put this T in the second equation, that is NR is equal to K1 into 1 by epsilon Z to the power K2. From here I will calculate epsilon Z, and for this problem this epsilon Z comes out to be 810 into 10 is to power minus 6. So whatever thicknesses we are providing, we have to ensure that after doing the pavement design, the vertical compressive strain at the top of subgrade is less than 810 microstrains. Okay. Okay, so what we can do, we can take a trial thickness. Let us take some trial thickness. Let us take, let us say this is granular base and this is granular subbase. Let us say that the total thickness of granular base is how much? 300. Let us say this is 300. Okay, or let us say this is 345. Oh, we took 345, so this is 345, right? Okay, and we have taken this as for starting. Let us say this is 80 mm we are taking. So I'm taking the bituminous layer as 80 mm. The granular base plus granular subbase is 345 mm. Okay, the CBR of the subgrade for that particular location was actually 4.78. So the value of E is 47.8 from that formula, correlation formula. If I know the modulus of the subgrade, if I know the height of the granular layer, okay, I can find out the modulus of the granular layer using that equation 0.2 into h to the power 0.64 or something like that, whatever it is. Okay, so once we do that calculation, we will get the value of E as 132.58. So let us say 132. Okay, so what we have now, in summary, what we have H1 is equal to 80 mm, H2 is equal to 345, E1 is equal to 2000, E2 is equal to 132, and E3 is equal to 47.8. The Poisson's ratio of all these three layers is taken as 0.35. Okay? So this is the input we will give in the IIT PAVE software. So I am just going to that particular location where the IIT PAVE is located. So I'm sorry. Okay, so let me click here. Okay, so we are here. You can see this is the folder where my IIT PAVE software is kept. This is the IIT PAVE start button. I'm double clicking it. You get this window. Okay, so it says IIT PAVE developed by Transportation Engineering Division, IIT Kharagpur. Design a new pavement section. We have three layers. The elastic modulus of first layer was 2000. Poisson's ratio 0.35. And the first trial we are taking as 80 mm. The elastic modulus of the second layer is 132. Okay. The Poisson's ratio 0.35. And the thickness I have taken for starting is 345. Okay. The elastic modulus for the third layer is 47.8. And the Poisson's ratio is 0.35. Now it asks for wheel load. So if you remember, we have dual wheel set. 80 kilonewton is the total rear axle. So on one dual set, we have 40 kilonewton. And on one wheel, we have 20 kilonewton. So the wheel load for one wheel is 20,000 Newton. 20,000 Newton. The tire pressure is 0.56 MPa, which is standard. Now, since we are interested to find out the horizontal tensile strain at the bottom of bituminous layer and the vertical compressive strain at the top of subgrade, let us choose 4 analysis points. So my first point will be at a depth of 80, which is the bottom of bituminous layer, and a radial distance of 0, which is just just below the tire. The other point which I will choose is same at the same depth, but radial distance I will choose as the value of A, which is the radius of the tire, which is usually taken as 155. Okay. And the point 2 is on the top of subgrade, so it should be 80 plus 345, which is 425. So 425 0 and 425 155. Okay. And our wheel set is a dual wheel set, so I will choose as wheel set as 2 and I will submit the data. So here the window pops out that the values successfully submitted. Okay. Then I will run. It says done. So okay. Now this window will open. it says view here or open file in editor. So I would like to view it here, just making it big screen. So now you see what we have here. Okay, we have the values of stresses and strains. So suppose this is epsilon T, which is the tensile strain at the bottom of bituminous layer. I am trying to look it at a depth of 80 mm. So you see there are two values, 80 and 80L. And now you try to imagine that you have a bituminous layer, below that you have a base layer. So there is an interface between the two layers. Okay, this 80 without any, this 80, this indicates that it is talking about a location just at the top of the base layer. This 80L is talking about the point just at the bottom of the bituminous layer. Okay, so that is why there are 2 points at the interface, one at the bottom of the first layer and the second at the top of the second layer. Okay, so we are trying to look at 80L because we are looking at the bituminous layer. So we will come here, we will see EPT and EPR, epsilon T and epsilon R. So whatever is higher in these two, we will take that value. You can see that the higher of these two value is first one. So it is 0.466 E. In other words, it is 466 into 10 is to power minus 6. Okay, 466 into 10 is to power minus 6. And our allowable tensile strain, if you remember what we took, was 404 into 10 is to power minus 6. Okay, which means the actual strain which is coming is higher than the allowable, which means we will have to increase the thickness of the layer, and this design is not working. So we will go to back edit. We will take the thickness instead of 80, let us take it as 100 mm. Okay, other things remain the same. Our analysis point will change. Now this is 100, this is 100, this should be 445 now, and this also should be 445. Okay, so I am again writing here submit, value successfully submitted, run. Okay, view here. Okay, so now you see that how much we are getting as 404. Okay, and our permissible was also 404. So this is just at the boundary line. Probably we can do one more iteration. Maybe I can take the thickness as 110. So my analysis point will be 110 now. 110. This will be 455. And this will be 455 because I have just increased 10 mm. Submit. Okay, run. Okay, view here. Now you see the value is 376, which is less than 404. So our criteria for fatigue cracking is satisfied here. The next criteria was epsilon Z, which is at the top of subgrade. So I'll be looking at the values values with L. So this column, probably this row. So I am looking at epsilon Z here. You see epsilon Z. This is 722, which is less than 810. So here also our criteria is satisfied. So for this case, what will be our proposal as a pavement designer? What will be our proposal? That use H1. I'm sorry. Use H1 as 110, H2 as 345. Okay, and with this one with the properties, this is the property. Okay, so I hope this is also clear to you. I hope I am on time, and with this I will with this demonstration I would like to conclude the session today, and you can ask me any questions if you have. Thank you.
Hello. Yeah. So I think I mean there are one question from Rajat Pandey.
Okay.
Okay, I think he's just asking how can I get IIT PAVE? I mean, I think it's a little generic question.
So you can actually contact IRC. You can get, I think they are, I don't know, they are giving probably with IRC 37 2018.